I'll try to give here, and then we will try watching him. Sir, in your syllabus, Franz Boas is actually mentioned in what is called historical particularism. Now, I'm here to first tell you about what is historical particularism, and then we'll try explaining what is the methodology of Boas. We are actually talking about a time of early 1900s, 1913, 1920, like that. Can you tell me what is that country in the western part of Africa that is called Bun of Africa region, in the western part of Africa, the one that is surrounded by the three sides and then by one single country, and on the other side you have an ocean. So it's like on all the three sides by one country, and then you have a sea coast. Nigeria is not on that side. और बताइए हाँ? I heard Morocco, I didn't respond. और बताएं और I repeat my question. हाँ अभी देख सकते हो. Bun of Africa, western side. West माने कि इधर होता है. हाँ western side. हाँ. Bun of Africa, there is one country that is surrounded by the other by one single country on all the three sides. I don't think Morocco is that. Gambia. Why I am choosing this name is a very popular political leader from Gambia was making this statement, that how can the world be rid of racism when every small move that you make, including the first move on the chessboard, is by the white color. It is so very ingrained in the thinking, in the psyche of the people, that even if you do not want to use race, somehow, why not you start with the black pawns to move? You make the move first from the white itself. Generally, black is considered to be inauspicious in most of the occasions. Somehow, maybe if a classical evolutionist is looking at it, he might call it a psychic unity of mankind, that see everybody is fond of white color, and then see the different answers people try to give. Why only fairer skin? Why only white color? It was that time when he was writing, when he was coming into anthropology, Boas was coming into anthropology, the world in general, the social sciences in particular, were facing this problem of race and racism. Keeping that aside, I am trying to repeat what I have said about him at different places. He was not in the liking of making generalizations as if the statement is valid for all situations and all times to come. When you are, and we know very well, when we are writing an ethnograph is a time-specific document. You are writing an account of a community that is valid for that particular moment. So if at all you are reading about Toda today, if you visit the Toda region, it is difficult to find the same kind of the whole thing that you have watched in the video the other day. Acha. Today I would suggest one documentary to watch back home called Transition of Chenchus. Chenchu is a South Indian tribe that is known to be one of the primitive tribal groups of India, depending heavily on foraging. Some of you who must have come from those regions, Sri Shailam and the nearby areas, you must have seen them. These were originally the people who depended mostly on the food gathering, little bit of hunting, a lot of extraction of honey, etc. But that documentary tells you how things have changed. See, when they started losing the hunting areas, some of them started taking up this work of assisting the travelers as the guides there to reach Lord Mallikarjuna temple. I am not talking about a time where blacktop roads are there and things like that. When these were not there, the transition had already started. And then of course government of India started suggesting various things. Some of them moved into shifting cultivation, some of them moved into being agricultural laborers so you can actually see in the documentary how things have changed. So coming back there, ethnograph is a momentary thing. So for Bowers, if somebody is writing a statement generalizing that it is applicable to all societies at all points of time, that he did not like. As I was already mentioning, he was not subscribing to all the existing ideas in anthropology. He was not accepting classical diffusionistic ideas. He was not accepting the diffusionistic ideas that seemed to be very flawful. So he was not somebody who was ready to be put under one particular group of thinkers and branding them as such. I told you in the art class that it is very dangerous to have the female students. The female students did a damage for him by branding him as somebody called historical particularist. Because he was the one who said that every culture group, every individual can be understood only if you study them particularly. Because he understood that no two individuals, no two culture groups are one and the same. And as a culturologist, as an ethnographer, he said it is the responsibility of the discipline to respect the diversity. Unless otherwise you respect the diversity, you will not be able to understand their problems or their situations. Because you are studying them particularly in their own right, they branded him as a particularist. And the second thing is, for him, history is very important. What you are today is because of your history. What you are today is because of your history. But interestingly, sometimes, even if your history is different, you might be accidentally been there at the same cultural evolution stage. I repeat, two statements. One is what you are today. You, in the sense, it may be an individual, it may be a culture group. What you are today is because of your history, number one. Secondly, you might be having or you might be existing at the same relative stages of culture, or you might be possessing several similar cultural traits because of different historical reasons. Did you understand what I said? To put it simply, you are all there today at this stage in this class, meaning all of you are preparing for UPSC. It doesn't mean that all your history is one and the same. Meaning that why you are there at this stage, why you are having certain culture traits, may be because of diverse reasons. The reason for a culture trait may be different, meaning history may be different, but you might be existing at the same cultural level. Once again, sir, he believed that to understand every culture group, you will have to study them particularly. No generalization should be made. If you are generalizing, you are actually having that prejudice and you are trying to judge people. Every culture group has to be studied in its own right and from their perspective. I used one word, to study them from their perspective. What was that? Emic ideology. Emic is studying from the insider's perspective. If you want to understand the culture group, you will have to study them from their perspective. I told you at that time that though he was not using emic term, he was saying that it has to be an insider's perspective. Secondly, history is important, and hence he was looking at both material and non-material histories. For him, archaeological study is very important because archaeology gives us material evidences of non-material things. Yesterday somebody had asked me after the class, what is the difference between material and non-material? I repeat the sentence. For Bowers, history is important. History has to be studied from both material and non-material aspects. because material is a representative of what is non-material. Material is a representative of what is non-material. Sir, be in the class. Sir, when I decide to start a batch with anthropological thought, I am indirectly sacking my own feet. Because it's a rarity that any teacher would decide to begin with anthropological thought. Many times what we understand, we don't understand. What we think, we don't understand. But if you'll have to understand what somebody else who was there centuries ago is thinking, why he is thinking that way, it is very difficult. So I have actually taken a very bold decision of starting the discipline with anthropological thought. But that requires a more than 100% attention of the student. So even if you don't feel good in the class, you seem to be feeling good. Something like a COVID. Sir, I repeat, going back there. For both, history is important. Both material and non-material aspects have to be studied in history. In historical studies, I made two statements. One was that culture groups may be having several similar culture traits because of different reasons, meaning that history may be different, but your present may be same. History may be different, but your present may be same. Consider two democratic countries. Say for that matter, you have Nepal that became democratic recently. India that is democratic. Reasons for democracy are different there and here. Here, right from the beginning, we fought for such kind of a system. We never wanted an autocratic system, or we never wanted something like a royalty ruling us. Right from the beginning, when we were fighting, we had the spirit of democracy in us. But for them, it was not that way. Though both of us were being ruled by some colonial fellow, when the colonial fellow left, the king took over there, here something else had happened. The realization about democracy must have come much later there. So the situations are different, but at one particular point in time, you seem to be having similarities in culture traits, but reasons are different. I was trying to give the example of you preparing for this exam. You might be here for different reasons. Some of us might be here because your father must have said. That was an unfulfilled dream of your father or grandfather. He couldn't make it to IAS. He wants you to be in IAS. Many of us might be of that category. They are trying to live their dream through you. Until and unless you make their dream your dream, you are there in the class, ma'am? You're there in the class? All of you. If you're not there in the class, please ask your neighbor to pinch you, please. I know that it's the best of lullabies you must have heard so far in life. I am sure your mother also has no time to give you lullabies to put you to sleep. Doesn't matter. I'm going back. Same historical stages, same cultural traits might be there because of two different reasons, but then, interestingly, even if you are same at this point of time, your future will not be same. Because of different reasons, you might be having similar culture traits. Just because you have certain similar traits today, it doesn't mean that tomorrow is one and the same. As simple as some of us will get through the exam, some of us will not. Those that make it through the exam will have a bad time of being in bureaucracy. And those who fail in UPSC will have a good life. Because you have several other things. When one door closes, several windows and ventilators would get opened. You can jump into any of the ventilators and have a good time from there. So don't worry, UPSC is not everything. But one problem is, unless and until you own UPSC, you decide that this is my life, you will not be able to make it through. That's one more problem there. So if present is similar, it doesn't promise that future will also be similar. Keeping this aside, Within the historical studies, he has a second thing, that is, he was focusing on both material and non-material aspects. I repeat that statement here. Non-material element is an evidence of non-material things. Material is an evidence of non-material. I use it in this particular context. How you actually worship, or what kind of cultural aspects are there in your religion, in your faith, are a reflection of what goes on there. All these physical things that you use, art of using vermilion, or maybe an idol there, or the kind of clothing that you wear. We had one student a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, who was from a Brahmin family. It's not simply Brahmin family, it's a total priestly family rather. They have generations of priesthood. This boy also has the priesthood there, had done his Vedic education in Tirumala, and the job was anyway there, but somehow he wanted to get into this. One big problem that he was facing was a newfound dress that he has to wear. Otherwise, he was very happy with his thing, and then one small thread there. So it doesn't, maybe if I'm using this word, it doesn't look good that you come in the same attire, sit here, start writing anthropology and other things, you will have to wear it. It's not simply that. They used to sport a big knot there. It was a heartbreaking thing for the family that they had to cut short the size of it. He was forced to put a small knot out there. Even, some of you must be having, you would be concealing that knot under the other hair. But this practice is there in many of the communities. So his history is totally different. But then he wanted to do this particular exam. So suddenly you find a new interest. Something else is dominating you. Boas was looking at this. Suddenly certain culture groups try to attain characteristics that are not theirs. It might be happening because of various reasons. It is here he is trying to hint at what is called diffusionism. But then these are the things that are material. This is a material thing. Or you break coconut in the temples. Why coconut? Coconut is pure. Other nuts are not pure.
Coconut water is not very. We can't pollute it.
Okay. Anything else?
It's a symbol of breaking one's ego.
Symbol of breaking one's ego in front of the god. Interestingly, if you go to the temples in Kerala, in churches in Kerala, they have this practice of breaking coconut in the churches also. Maybe because of two things. They must have migrated from one faith to the other, but then certain cultural things they are carrying on. There's an abundance also. What you offer to the god also is something that is taught to you in your faith. Now, let us look at it this way. What is the best thing that you offer to the god, and can you arrange the things that you offer to the gods in a hierarchy? Can we arrange? So, the best one at the top, the worst one at the bottom. What you offer to the gods. नींद आ रही है? थोड़ा घूम घाम के आ जाओ. Gold. నాకు చెప్పినాను నేను వెళ్తాను అసలు. I'll be the pujari there. తిరుపతి అంటున్నారా ఏంటి? Gold is the best thing that you offer, is it that?
If any king want to offer anything, he first offer gold, then land.
और बताइए. Flowers, okay. We are used to offering flowers to the gods and to the girls. Flower is considered to be the purest one, and then after the flower comes maybe the fruit, and then maybe the other variants that are vegetarian. Then comes the milk also. Some gods and goddesses, they love milk. Somehow gods have got their own special taste buds. Each god has got their own taste. సో మొత్తానికి మీకు కావాల్సింది అడగట్లేదు మాస్టారు. This is another practice. This is another practice. What you would want to have that you prepare on the day of the festival, in the name of the god you consume the whole thing. Offering to the god is only a symbolic element. He is not coming and having it. Can you go further down in the offerings? और बताइए.
Hair.
నువ్వు నాకు నచ్చావు మాస్టర్, బాగా నచ్చావు. గోల్డ్ అన్నావు, జుట్టు అన్నావు. నువ్వు తిరుపతి మంది కాదా? ఏం పేరమ్మా మీ పేరు? మీ పేరేం? దేవేందర్. కీప్ ఇన్ టచ్. अच्छा, ये सब तो docile variants हो गए. These are all docile variants, maybe. Sacrifice. I am actually talking about the food-based things. Vegetarian में हो गए, flowers हो गया या fruits हो गया, vegetarian food हो गया, milk, etc., etc. Then when you are giving that animal variant, that's where I wanted you to grade. You might be giving hens, goats and sheep, etc. Buffalo, no? మళ్ళీ నీటెస్టే వచ్చేగా. As you are going down, you seem to be having variants there. But maybe you missed out somewhere. I thought that even before you talk about flowers, etc., maybe you talk about offering your own self psychologically, giving your atma to the God. That is the last thing that you consider. Most of the time, we are believing in offering what is material, and what is not material, you are keeping to your own selves. Now, we are going to see in his examination the linkages between material and non-material. You must have read this story of Swami Vivekananda. A white fellow starts this discussion while he was traveling in a train, that why is it idolatry for the Hindus? Do you really need idols? There was almost like an agitated fight there, so Swamiji asked the photograph of the white man, and then tries to tarnish it, tries to stamp on it, kind of. Then suddenly this fellow gets agitated, and then he demonstrates that this is not you, that is you, but then I am trying to do something to your picture. You are not really feeling good. This is actually an image of yours, nothing more than that. Idol is an image of God. Everybody will not be in a position, everybody is not so scholastic that you concentrate on nothing. Some of us must have tried different kinds of yoga. Your yoga teacher might be asking you to keep not thinking anything. The moment you start not to think, you start thinking. Very difficult. There are certain very interesting aspects in Hinduism. There's one popular preaching that you should be observing Nishkama Karma. You should be observing Nishkama Karma, like a drop of water on the lotus leaf. You are not supposed to have attachments with what you're doing. Neki kar darya mein dal. You're not supposed to have attachments with the things that you are doing, with the act that you are into. Just imagine, you are supposed to have a marital love with your wife, but still you should not be attached. For the moment, just imagine, you should not be attached. Don't get bothered if somebody else visits her. Because after all, you should practice Nishkama Karma. Somehow I feel, the more you are getting evolved technologically, the more selfish you are becoming. My wife only for myself and my husband only for myself. This is not nishkama karma. Certain things, if you really like, you can appreciate. One other very interesting thing in Boas. One, we said, history is important. He doesn't like generalizations. Don't write about anything without seeing. Witness is important. Evidence is important. In order to get evidence, you should go to the field. Don't send your students just because they are there with you. You do your own job. Go to the field. Get the facts. There is something very interesting here. For him, every fact is important. The moment you go to this field, you will have to start documenting all the evidences that you are getting, all the information that you are getting. For him, when you want to go and study a culture group, don't try to have any preconceived notions about them. Generally, when you want to study, say, a simple society, a distant tribal population or a distant alien community, before going there, you at least make a preparation. You will try to know what kind of people they are, what could be their food habits, so that you don't get a shock of your life once you go there. You want to have some kind of an idea. Somebody else must have written an ethnograph. You would try reading ethnographs, and then you would try to see what kind of climatic conditions they are, based on which maybe you would have to pack your bags. But this is the kind of orientation that was given by Malinowski. He was giving guidelines for ethnographers, for the field workers. But this man Boas, he says, don't go with any kind of preconceived notions. And don't even decide what is the cultural trait that you want to study. For example, I ask you to go study the Toda. What in the Toda would be an element that you want to study? Pastoral, maybe. Kinship relations, their polyandry. When you are trying to give me these details, he says, maybe somebody has already influenced you. Because somebody who had studied Toda when there was rampant practice of polyandry when they were writing, and that book you have read. Now that actually rose a curiosity in you. When you go to Toda, you would want to study polyandry. But unfortunately today, if you go there, you don't find polyandry at all. You are disappointed. So what Boas says is, when you want to go and study a culture group, do not have anything in mind, any stereotypes in mind, that maybe these are these. For him, facts are important. Very remarkable statement I am giving about him here. He doesn't want anthropologists to give any theories. When you are giving a theory, you are trying to propose something that may be valid for different points of time and for different societies. If you are giving a theory, are you here? If you are giving a theory, you are actually trying to generalize things. Sir, if I am giving some statement like E is equal to mc square, I am trying to give you some law that may be valid for different occasions or all occasions, universality, etc., etc. For Boas, if you are trying to give a theory, and when it is valid for various occasions, times, people, etc., you are trying to make the study of culture, anthropology, a science. When you are trying to make it a science, you are trying to neglect the importance of studying variety. He strongly believed that what is valid for one culture group may not be valid for the others. What is right for you may not be right for them. Are you following? If I am going one step ahead, there is no universal right, no universal wrong. This concept of right and wrong within the same culture group might get altered over a period of time. This is a very important statement that I am making. Within the same culture group, What is right, what is wrong might change with time. Some of you who must have read the Old and New Testaments, you must have come across these discussions. In the Old Testament, God seems to be having a very violent way of doing things. He accepted violence in the Old Testament. But when it comes to the New Testament, there is non-acceptance of these violent means. You will have to submit yourself, there is a peace and there is a lot of patience that you will have to take up. So what is happening there is, what was accepted in the Old Testament as taking life for life was accepted. But when it comes to the New Testament, we see that when somebody is attempting to take your life, maybe give away your life. Are you following what I am saying? For the same group I am saying, for the same group, what was wrong yesterday may be right today and vice versa. So you cannot actually pass judgments, you should not try to bring theories in anthropology. If you are bringing theory, you are actually trying to make anthropology a science, which is not right. The strength of anthropology is to recognize, understand the variety in cultures, and hence there should not be a theory. But people called him somebody belonging to historical particularism theoretical approach. After you die, what people write about you, there is no control. Forget about after you die. When you're all alive today, people might be writing all kinds of things about you. You cannot go to everybody and say that, see, I am not this. What was he doing in the field? I'll give you a small list of his books. These are some of his books. You no need to write. We will come back on them. Central Eskimo. The second one is pronounced as, for the last benchers, the second one is pronounced as Kwakitul, written as UTL, pronounced as Kwakitul. Kwakitul text, Kwakitul of Vancouver Island, etc., etc. Primitive art, race, language and culture. We are going to see small video on race, language and culture today. But right now I am speaking of Kwakitul text. Kwakitul is one of the Red Indian community. Kwakitul Indians they are. What he was doing in the field, that was the question. When you go to the field is necessary for an anthropologist. What you do in the field is report all the facts. Here something that comes that is seen as a major criticism against Boas. If at all somebody had to criticize Boas, this is one thing where you can get a criticism. Report the facts. Don't analyze them. Facts by themselves will bring out a theory. Facts will themselves bring out an understanding of that culture. When he is making this statement, I repeat the statement for you. Do not indulge with the facts. Your duty as an ethnographer is to report the facts. Summing up, analyzing facts is not your duty. Report them as such. Facts will bring out their own conclusions, as if facts are people and they do things. This was something where, did you understand what I said? What we mean by facts is, anything could be a fact when you visit the fields. One problem with Boas is, he said, don't decide on what you want to study there. Whether you want to study food or marriage or whatever, anything. Don't decide. Once you go there, start writing. So in the process, what might happen is, what may be not vital you may be writing, what is vital you might be missing. One of the answers that I was reading the other day was about classical evolutionism, one of our friends was writing. Everything, anything that the individual knew of classical evolutionism, he or she was writing. The question actually was critical appraisal of classical evolution. Many times this happens in the exam. When we give you a question, you don't establish a link between you and the question. You might be reading the question once and you'll throw away the question paper. You might be seeing some students in the exam hall, they are searching for their question paper. You have seen the question once, then you start writing. After writing about 3 or 4 pages, you get it out. What is the question? So actually we can modify your question. Write what you know about classical evolution, rather than giving a specific one such as critical appraisal of classical evolution. Maybe Boasian writing was like that. For him, you are not supposed to analyze the facts. Facts will come out by themselves with a theory. I am not saying that is his statement, that's why I am repeating. Facts will come up with their own conclusions. That's where is the major issue. So Kwakitul text is not less than a 5,000-page document. The field document, handwritten document. When it came into print, automatically the numbers come out. Say the conservative print that we see today is a 500 pages. Kwakitul, a 500 pages document. After reading all those 500 pages, you don't know what to conclude. There are so many facts that he tries to give you. Each individual fact seems to be having a value. But what is it that you finally want to say about them? That is a major problem. That's why Malinowski says, I truly respect all this business of ethnography, but at least you should have some kind of a format within which you have to work. Interestingly, Albert Einstein and Bowers were contemporaries. And Einstein was saying this, in spite of the fact that you are working in a social science, the technological format of doing research and theorizing can be applied to social sciences also, meaning that we start with some kind of a hypothesis. When somebody said that solar system is circular and Earth is actually going in a circular format, circular path through around the sun, that is a hypothesis. Now whatever experiments that you might be doing, that is to cross-check whether we are moving in a circular path around the sun or in some other path. Once you cross-check with all the kinds of technologies and evidences that are there, and once the experiment is done, you would try to say whether your hypothesis is correct or incorrect. So for Einstein, this kind of methodology can be used in social sciences also. For Bowers, you are not supposed to give any hypothesis. When you are giving a hypothesis, that looks to be giving generalizations, and hence be far from there. This seems to be one glitch in the whole thing. But otherwise, he is the man who was giving anthropology to us, the fourfold classification. Every subfield that is there, he was there. He worked with them. He gave the importance to what is called archaeological studies, preserving the material, because material tells us what is the history behind the thought behind them. When we go to archaeology, we'll see every stone that we unearth, every bone that we unearth, we try to narrate a story from the stones and the bones. Otherwise, two bone evidences are there. One seems to be a gorilla fellow, the other could be a human individual. We try to compare the two. We'll try to see, in what ways we are superior to them. And we try to narrate a story that, see, this fellow had become this. Whether this fellow had become this, there is no proper evidence. But we tell a story as if it is true. Many times in archaeology, we find this problem. Sir, what happens there is, the first fellow to give a story is the fellow who is intelligent. His story is considered to be accepted. If at all somebody comes later, he doesn't agree with the first story, the responsibility of disproving the first fellow lies with the second one. Are you here, sir? I'll give you a very interesting story there. Don't sleep. Later we will see a documentary of Boas. Many times the problem that we find is, we find a fossil, we don't know what to do with that. At what stage of evolution of man we'll have to put it. I here want to give you a story that had actually affected the entire anthropology for about half a century. There was one man called Dawson. Dawson was an anthropologist from Britain. He wanted to prove certain things. Above anything else, I'm not going into the technical aspects. One of the things he wanted to prove was Britain also had human evolutionary past. Because when he was writing, every other continent had pre-human evidences. Africa had, Asia had, Southern America had, Australia had, name it, Europe had, rest of the Europe, not Britain. You can actually fabricate evidences, that's the story here. He tried to create an evidence by taking up certain human bones from one place, certain gorilla bones from another place, tried to create an evidence. They tried to create a fossil, painting it in the same way. I mean, the entire fossil should be in the same color. Kind of stuff. What exactly he had done to that fossil, we will be doing in archaeology. But here I am trying to communicate to you that being a scientist, you can create the evidence. He created the evidence there, and he tried to prove that, okay, Britain also had human evolutionary past. Once he had given the theory, people had to accept. For 50 years, still the techniques of dating of the fossils were invented. After 50 years, he was also not there. This fossil was subject to dating methods, and then they found that this is a combination of bones belonging to two different species altogether, which belong to two different timelines altogether. The bottom line is, when I am giving you a theory, you will have to accept it. If you don't accept, you try to disprove me. That is the problem that was happening in most of the cases in anthropology. So anybody can be an anthropologist. When I give you this statement, anybody can be an anthropologist. The responsibility of disproving you doesn't lie with you, or proving yourself doesn't lie with you. Disproval responsibility is somebody else. Now, so this man was trying to study material, non-material aspects, etc., etc. This small discussion.
Welcome to the Macat Multimedia Series, a Macat analysis of Franz Boas's Race, Language, and Culture. How should we compare different cultures? Franz Boas, an American anthropologist and advocate for human rights, lived from 1858 to 1942, a time when hierarchical cultural theories were widespread. He disagreed with this school of thought, and in Race, Language, and Culture, a collection of essays released in 1940, he presented a different view. Boas argued that humans are not reducible to simple understandings based upon their biology. Instead, we are shaped by several other factors. The cultures people interact with and major historical events in their ancestors' lives help determine a societal structure. Culture, Boas believed, is a bigger determinant of evolution in human societies than biology. Further, Boas believed we couldn't make value judgments of the traditions and beliefs of societies that developed in completely different environments. In doing so, he developed cultural relativism, which states that we can't judge different cultures using our own cultural values. Similarly, Boas rejected hierarchical theories that ranked cultures in terms of their value or worth. He contended that societies may be different, but none are better than any other. To understand Boaz's argument, let's consider a pair of societies on an island. One society exists up in the mountains, while the other is located by the coast. The coastal society's culture is based on fishing. Inhabitants learn to fish at a young age, and the whole population survives off the ocean. The mountain society's culture is based on hunting. Inhabitants begin hunting while they are children, and the population's main food is meat. Both societies have developed a stable social structure based on their primary activity. Their political, economic, and religious lives are built around this. These two societies are not in contact, except for a few travelers who have passed from one place to the other. From the stories they share, each society decides their way of living is superior to the other. One day, the leaders of the two societies meet and begin to talk. Each highlights the benefits of their way of life, believing that they can improve the other society. As time passes, they both begin to realize that neither society is better or worse, but they are just different. They recognize that to understand each other's way of life at all, they would have to use cultural relativism. This requires them to understand the complex factors that have shaped the other society. Franz Boas's Race, Language, and Culture was a highly progressive work which became very influential to 20th century American anthropology. A more detailed examination can be found in the McCat analysis.
Please note that down so that you can back home. Introduction to Franz Boas, Race, Language, and Culture. This is about one small concept. Sir, there are certain important concepts that he dealt with. So while you watch the video, the next one that we are going to play, you focus on the occurrence of these. One is cultural relativism. The second one is study of totems. At one other place we will also see study of face masks. Of course the other things are there, concept of race, concept of historical particularism. Several examples that he presents to us, why we do particular things, why do we have specific material aspects, or why particular practices are there. At face mask study also, there are certain communities that have face masks that use the, you also must have used face masks. As children, you must have used face masks. Why do we use face masks? For fun, maybe. You wanted to look different, look like a Spider-Man, so you have a Spider-Man mask.
To hide identity.
Huh?
To hide identity.
To hide identity, many times. See, actually speaking, with the same face, we try to hide our own identity. We try to present what we are not. Maybe we every time try to present the best of our side, and the darker side we try to put it behind. Those are the physical masks. Now before I show you the video, there is something that I want to talk about here. Face mask could be for different reasons. It may be a religious reason, ritual reason, it may be something like a fun, it may be because you have a social status. If you have that social status, you are supposed to wear this mask. One of his other studies is the study of body painting. Study of body painting. Body painting. These days it's a very fanciful thing. Tattooing the entire body, minimizing the requirement of clothing. Sir, I know we have finished about 7 classes so far. This is, I think, our 8th class. what I want to see in you is minimizing the aspect of judging people. Whether we get into service, that's a secondary thing. When this element gets ingrained in you, your approach in the other papers towards the general life will also change. You don't look at somebody with some kind of judgment. Maybe that is a larger requirement in administration also. If at all you want to really reach out to the roots of the problem, or why somebody is demanding certain things, altogether from an external perspective, you will not be able to get there. See, at the end of the day, even if you do not understand them totally, at least you should be able to make an effort to understand them. This is something that we are trying to bring into your mind. Now, going to the body painting, we should not be judging people just because they are painting their bodies. The moment you see somebody who is tattooing themselves, if you are not from that kind of a culture, you might be getting all weird thoughts about them. In one of our videos in the future classes, we are going to see, there is one lady whom I will show to you who had pierced her entire body. You can't actually notice her, the flesh and bone. You will only see all the steel balls in her body. The entire face pierced with so many things. The other day when we had the Jatra in Hyderabad, if at all you had visited the place, you could have noticed people taking, all the sharper things from their nose and don't know God knows from where. People say that there's a magic behind it, but there are also people who really do that. Why they do that? They might look to be crazy for you. They have their own logic. It's as crazy as choosing anthropology. In Polynesian societies, Boas was studying body painting. It is actually something that communicates your social status in them. See, in today's times you have mehendi. That's a temporary one. That's a temporary body painting. The certain body paintings are there that are temporary, certain are there that are permanent. So one fine day you decided, nahi tere siva koi aur nahi. Once you have decided that, you wrote her name here, wherever. Later you thought that no, iske siva bahut kuch hai. Aur bhi hai dard duniya mein. Once you understood that, you can't remove it. Maybe some kind of surgical removal only. So, sir, take my life tip. All these are momentary things. At that moment, you felt that tere siva kuch aur nahi. But immediately you will find that bahut kuch hai. Don't get tempted and start writing things. Likhna hi hai to pani pe likh lo. And preserve the water with you. He was comparing temporary and permanent paintings, body paintings in Polynesia. And the quantity of painting that they make, and what exactly is the one that they paint on the body. Simply put, temporary body paintings indicate the temporary social status they have in the society. For example, the political leader's position is an elected one. So this election you won, next election you might not win. So after having won this election, you will be painting your body with a temporary one. Maybe with one kind of washing itself that will go, otherwise it won't go. Or maybe every day you get up as if there is no other work, you go on painting yourself. Because without that painting, people will not recognize you. And in Polynesia, the social status is indicated by, for example, you belong to a lowly community, a slaves community there. You are not supposed to paint your body above the knees and below your waist. Only the royalty are supposed to be painting that particular length in the body. Permanent body painting is something that indicates your permanent status. It is here I am trying to give you some example which was brought out as a documentary in Nat Geo a few years ago. There is a clan in southern Africa which is called the crocodile clan. This is a crocodile clan. The moment people see you, you will have to know that you are a crocodile. Crocodile clan is my ancestor is crocodile. So I will have to possess the crocodile characteristics. The best thing that I can do is I chisel my body properly. I create the kind of gradations that, the scales that a crocodile has. The documentary, if possible, I will try to give you the link. You can enjoy it back home. It is slightly offbeat kind of a one. People with weak heart are not supposed to see such things. That is the disclaimer. He has actually picturized, narrated the whole length of processes the people undergo. The young fellows, see, it's like this. There are the young men who get initiated, like how you have Upanayana in Hindu society. They also have intricate, very detailed procedures through which the young men are initiated into the youthful stage. That procedure goes on for weeks actually. A bunch of young men are actually passing from one stage of life to the other together. All these young men are subject to the entire procedure together. So throughout the procedure they would remain naked, and there is the priest there who would be extensively using his blade with such kind of expertise. He would be slicing and then wiping the blood, and then kind of, this thing goes on for weeks. And after the said number of weeks are over, once these young men are released out of that region, that particular sacred space, you can notice from a distance that he is a crocodile. This is a permanent example of a permanent body painting. When I am narrating the whole thing, if you are raising your eyebrows, feeling awkward about it, and thinking what kind of lady she is describing all this, you are still far from anthropology. Sir, whatever is not given in the dictation, you will be writing from the documentary. Okay? Make a note. Contributions of Franz Boas. Contributions of Franz Boas to anthropology. Contributions of Franz Boas to anthropology. Franz Boas. Boas is the one that moves very swiftly. That is the meaning of it. I try to give certain meanings so that you can preserve the names for your future use. Franz Boas. Write down. Acha, I'll have to give this. I already started getting some answers where people are saying that he was born in so and so place, and then year of birth also is not really required in your answers. When a question like contribution of Boas or contribution of somebody, you need not have to give the names of the cities where they are born, or the hospitals where they are born, or the dai who had delivered, kind of things. I hope you understand. Those details are not necessary. Sometimes, occasionally, the universities or the colleges where they must have studied becomes important, but not in all the cases. See, it is difficult for us to remember our own schools and colleges. अब कितने लोगों के क्या क्या याद रखोगे? No? I said so much. Write down. A German by origin, migrated to Northern America, and became instrumental in spreading the idea of diffusion, and several concepts of anthropology to North America. Hence being called father of American anthropology. He trained, keep writing in points, he trained a complete generation of anthropologists such as Kroeber, Whistler, Benedict, Margaret Mead, M-E-A-D, D amma T kaadu, Margaret Mead, Malinowski, R.C. Brown and others, comma, who went on to become theoreticians and scholars in anthropology. Bowers encouraged his students to pursue their varied interests and hence choosing particular subfields in anthropology. Continue writing there. He pleaded the scholars to be focusing on data and to be free from prejudices, and be away from the tendency of generalizing. Come to the next point. He introduced the subject matter to the discipline of anthropology prescribing the fourfold classification of the content into sociocultural, biological, linguistic, and archaeological anthropology. The scheme, continue writing there, the scheme and several details of the branches therein, the scheme and several details of the branches therein are still adhered to in contemporary anthropology. In contemporary anthropology. Write the next point. Bowers criticized speculative and sweeping generalizations made by classical evolutionists, British and German-Austrian diffusionists, and put his effort to replace them with empirical studies. Write the next point. To make the discipline more rational, he prescribed several fieldwork techniques. Continue writing there. He suggested anthropologists to make primary sources as the basis of their writings. Primary sources as the basis of their writings, alongside the techniques of interviews, genealogies, and historical studies. He insisted on learning the native language and preparing field note in the native language alone. Keep writing the next points. As he belonged to the time when the discipline was affected by the notions of geographical determinism, he examined the extent to which cultures were influenced by geographies. He found that several aspects other than geography mold cultures. He propounded that culture of a society is a product of environmental conditions, psychological factors, and historical connections. Hence, each culture is unique in itself. Each culture is unique in itself and must be studied in its own perspective. Such a way of ethnography writing in the later times came to be known as emic ideology. EMIC, emic ideology. His successors branded him as a historical particularist, due to the importance he gave to historical studies and culture particular studies. His historical studies were a combination of examining the link between material and non-material aspects and why a culture group has specific culture traits in the present times. In the study of natural history, he also incorporated role of diffusion in bringing culture change. This line of thinking encouraged his students such as Whistler and Kroeber to come up with culture area approach in diffusionism. As a part of historical studies, right in the next line, as a part of historical studies, he introduced museum methodology. Museum methodology. Under this, he initiated the practice of collecting material evidences from the field and preserving them in the museums. Cultural material aspects collected in the field are arranged chronologically, keeping in view the geographical areas from where the material was collected and based on the dominant culture traits. When the material was so organized, he found that cultural items of tribes living close to each other were more similar than those that lived apart. Write the next one there. Among various literary contributions, the most significant were: number one, Central Eskimo, give me a minute of time. (1888), Central Eskimo, 1888. It is a complete study. Write a description of the book. It is a complete study of Eskimos, incorporating their linguistic studies, myths, folk tales, economic distribution, etc. Sir, underline the word economic distribution in Eskimos. Once you finish writing the dictation, just remind me, we will have to talk about that. Then come to the second book, Kwakitul texts. I'll write down for you. Kwakitul texts, 1905. It is a detailed ethnograph. It is a detailed ethnograph for the first time produced on any Western North American Red Indian population. In this book, Bowers, for the first time, presented his ideas of diffusion. Continue writing there. The period between 1850 and 1920 was that of transition for the Kwakitul Indians. As they were getting influenced by industrialization, migration, etc. Continue writing there. Changes brought in by such influences was studied in a greater detail by Bowers. It is evident in his explanations of potlatch systems, community feasts, which were on a decline. Take the third one. Kwakitul of Vancouver Island. Bowers examined influence of geography on culture with relevant field data. Right, the next one. Mind of primitive man. 1911. The book presented a socio-psychological perspective to the study of tribal ethnographs. to the study of tribal ethnographs. He provided the complex interplay between culture, psychology, and biological aspects of man. In the later times, continue writing there. In the later times, the psychological and behavioral aspects were picked up as a chief subject matter by his students Ruth Benedict, who developed another major school of thought called Culture Personality School. Right, the next one. Primitive art. It is a monograph of American Indians presenting the first ever study of art of simple societies. It brought out a vital understanding that, right in quotes, everything of simple societies is not simple. Do you remember this sentence we used earlier also? Everything in simple societies is not simple. Come to the next one. Race, language and culture. Race, language and culture, 1940. In this book, Bowers gave his revolutionary concept of cultural relativism. It meant that no culture is superior. No culture is superior nor inferior. And there are no universally valid values and laws. Hence it is futile to compare or judge cultures. Continue writing there. Bowers used this concept to fight racism as an academic and a practical concept. Right in the next paragraph. Among different branches of anthropology, Bowes personally tried writing and working practically in the field in all the 4 major branches. He used the practical methods of anthropometry for fighting racism and to study impact of migration and adaptation at a biological level. With regard to anthropometry, he introduced different measurement techniques, especially to measure the head size. The term cephalic index became popular in anthropology when he presented comparative accounts of Negroes, Mongoloids, and Caucasian racial stocks. Those are the 3 popular races that we come across: Caucasians, Mongoloids, and Negroids. He proved with the head measurements that Caucasians are in no way superior to the black Negroes. He found that environment has a major role to play in bringing specific shape and size of the skulls or heads. So this is going to be one very interesting study. When we come to racial classifications, we will see which populations have broad heads, which have narrow heads. What is the meaning of a broad and narrow head? Does the facial shape have any relation with the head shape? Just imagine you have a broad head and you have a narrow face. How is it that the broad head and a narrow face would have no? Or maybe a very broad face and a narrow head, whether that would gel well. Whether broad head means that it is more IQ or anything else it communicates. There is something here. Are you fine in the class? I'm sure you must be. This is a broad presumption and generalization that I make. Yeah, about head shape. Suppose in a particular region, there is a major occurrence of broad-headed individuals. Broad head, you understand? So if you touch your head, there are two protrusions there. When compared to your neighbor, maybe this size is much more for you. So you are a broad-headed individual when compared to the other fellow. But suppose in your community, in your culture group, there is a preference for narrow head, not a broad head. People prefer long and narrow head rather than a broad head. Suppose your culture group has a preference for a long and narrow head, not a broad one. You might look at it ridiculously when I say that some people have a preference for long head, whereas they generally have a broad head. You shall not be shocked, because we find instances even in contemporary Chinese society where there is a preference for very thin feet in the female. Men prefer female with very thin feet. That's how there is a practice of, there is a practice of using tight bandages there so that your feet actually become very thin. We are going to come across culture groups who chisel their heads so nicely that the broad head actually would start looking very long and narrow. So now onwards you should start relishing such kind of things, that if somebody is chiseling their heads, wow, kind of a thing. It's not that. No? Keep writing, sir. Bowers applied statistical techniques in the collection and analysis of data in physical anthropology. He studied human growth, especially age and height dimensions among children. He measured about 19,000 children to bring out statistics for, number one, comparison between mainstream American children and Japanese children from migrant families. Secondly, comparing Japanese native families, comparing children from Japanese native families and migrant Japanese children in America. He was using the data to study impact of geography and heredity in the growth of children. Write the next point. He was the first to raise the issue of ethics in anthropology. The issue of ethics in anthropology. He was against use of anthropological skills for the detriment of people anywhere in the world. Sir, this topic of ethics in anthropology we will be picking up in 1 or 2 days. So we will have a complete discussion about how he had started, where the misuse of anthropology was happening, kind of things. Write a small side head there. Criticism. I'm trying to give 2 or 3 major points there. Boas was criticized for his overemphasis on facts and inability to theorize. Emphasis on data collection to theorize. Emphasis on data collection without objective made him collect frivolous data and at times he missed out important features of society under study. I repeat, emphasis on data collection without objective made him collect frivolous data, and at times he missed out important features of societies under study. Write the second one. Boas completely eliminated the use of comparative approach. But the importance of this approach was demonstrated by functionalists, especially in situations where tribal and non-tribal communities are getting exposed to one another especially in the contemporary times. Continue writing under that. An analysis by Marvin Harris An analysis by Marvin Harris presents that Bowers was critical of the ethnocentric and derogative way of applying comparisons by classical evolutionists. In fact, comparison with an appreciation of diversity, was very much evident in his writings. His historical approach and when he tried finding different reasons for having similar culture traits, in different culture groups, is where comparison is extensively used. Right in the next slide. Thus, Bowers made several original contributions to the development of anthropology and training students extensively to generate manpower required for the development of a new discipline. Full stop. So before I start airing the video, first finish your planner. Doesn't mean that you should be leaving. You are majorly writing about Bowers and you had completed American anthropology. So, sir, Bowers, American School, these are the two that you have written today. Sources, of course, class notes. Plus, there was one video that you had seen. What was that video? An introduction to Franz Bowers. An introduction to Franz Bowers. Race, language, and culture. Race, language, and culture. There is the second one that we are going to watch now. Introduction to Franz Bowers, Race, Language, and Culture. That is a general criticism people give. Because initially when he himself was writing, he clearly makes a mention, I don't subscribe to this method. But when he was, as we were talking in various contexts, he was trying to see, say that different historical reasons are there, but still you are there at the same. So inherently you are actually comparing. But you say that he was not using the way ethnocentrically classical evolutionists were using. This is a more sympathetic way of writing.
Comparison is prevalent in his writing.
Sir? It has been there, yes. Comparison was there.
And this Marvin Harris, who is the
Mostly in India at least, whoever is writing on anthropological thought, they follow his books, Marvin Harris books. I wanted to get today a couple of them, but tomorrow I will be getting a few books so that you can see and compare the books of Harris. Harris was an authority of anthropological thought, because one of the famous books that he had written was History and Evolution of Anthropological Thought. So that's where he was trying to give major trends in anthropology. And that is the reason why, and also because I personally have a lot of affection for him. And most of our lectures are from his writings. That is the reason why I give due credit to him. If you don't like him, आप उसको drop कर दो. But I personally like him, so. He is known for some interesting studies, Sacred Cow in India. So this is that man. You already have seen him giving a pose to the picture. Franz Boas, Shackles of Tradition. Runs into 52 minutes, so we'll see whatever we can.
A year of life as an Eskimo among Eskimos had a profound influence upon the development of my views, because it led me away from my former interests and towards the desire to understand what determines the behavior of human beings.
This documentary actually tells us about what Boas was doing in the Eskimo region. There is somebody else who had gone there after a long time, tries to visit the same areas. Sir, so far when you were watching there are certain dogs pulling that cart. This is the kind of lifestyle even today Eskimos continue to be having. When dogs were not there, they used to have the trolley which they would drag with strong ropes which they would put here, and actually the rope or from both the sides would be pulling the trolley out there. So basically you can see that in many of the Eskimo people who are into this kind of living, their incisors are worn out by the time they are about 30, 40. This is an incredible cultural thing, commonality that you find in them.
It was during his year of compulsory military training in 1881 that he decided to study the
should you
relation
do
of
it
the
at home?
Eskimo to their environment.
Should you do it at home? Huh? But do it, because there are so many things that you will have to take from this documentary, like how genealogies, what kind of expeditions that he was into, which regions, like Baffle Island, etc., etc. तो आप घर में कीजिए. I am leaving you 15 minutes early. Thank you. There was something on economic side I have asked you to remind me. That is a continuation of geography determining culture. Sir, in one of your previous classes, we had mentioned Lorna Marshall, who had actually studied the Kung Bushmen and the detailed way in which the Bushmen share their hunt. Lorna Marshall was comparing Kung Bushmen with the Eskimos. But remember, she had done her field work in the Kung Bushmen. She had visited them and seen the whole thing. Eskimos, she didn't visit. This is also to show that visit is important. She believed, and by the way, she had read various ethnographs, she came to an understanding that Eskimos do not share their food, whereas Kung Bushmen share every bit of it. Eskimos do not share. They are highly me-centered people. And she tried to analyze the reason. She believed that geography may be the reason. Kung Bushmen live in tropics. They are very extremely high temperatures there. Food cannot be preserved for a long time. And hence whatever they had hunt that day, they should finish on the same day. And hence they are sharing. On the other hand, the Eskimo, who almost live in a refrigerator, they need not have to preserve. It automatically gets preserved. So whatever food they are hunting, they keep it for themselves for the future. But then, once you watch this video back home, you will understand that Eskimos were not the people who are reserving things for themselves. They are also having this intricate, very extensive mechanism of sharing with the people. So this is a challenge for Lorna Marshall. Now I go back, without referring to Beauvoir, I am sticking to Marshall. She was saying that geography determines culture, comparison, Bushmen and Eskimo. Now she herself looks at another community nearby the Kung Bushmen called, that is how you write G, a parallel symbol, and ANAS, pronounced as Lanas. This is pronounced as Lanas. Lanas are a community living next to Kung Bushmen, meaning that they are also living in a geographical condition similar to Kung Bushmen. If at all geography determined, same kind of sharing mechanism should have been there, but Lanas do not share. Because Lanas have mastered the art of preserving food. That's where she indicates, apart from geography, maybe technology also helps. They have mastered the art of preserving the meat that they have hunted. So they would dry the meat and preserve it for the future, they wouldn't share. Had it not been the technology, maybe Lanas also would have shared. That actually reminds me of, how at the time of Bakrid, we have this practice, जिसके लड़ बनाते हैं, लंबे लंबे मटन के पीसेस निकालेंगे, उसके लड़ बनाएंगे, मसाला वसाला लगाएंगे, धूप में सुखाएंगे, so that अभी मुंह में पानी आ रहा है, लंच का भी टाइम है, so I think I'll leave you there with that sumptuous thing in the mouth. Have a good time. See you tomorrow.